was telling the people to do is we're going to build a memorial here. We're going to put these stones in this river, and when people come to this river from this point on, what's going to happen is they are going to remember what God did right here at this very spot. Now, we have to remember what it was that God actually did right there at that very spot. Remember, let's go back to Joshua chapter 4, and I'll just start at verse 14. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priest of the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now, the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. So think last spring and summer. Think Missouri River, think downtown Omaha. Imagine what it would be trying to cross that river at that time. The river is at flood stage here. And to make matters worse, they got Pharaoh's army behind them. They're trying to cross into the land that has been promised to them by God for generation after generation after generation. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge. Now, listen to the great things that God can do here at the water's edge. The water from the upstream stopped flowing. It piled in a heap a great distance away in a town called Adam. Now, many of us have been in that spot, and some of us are in that spot right now. The exact same spot that Joshua and his people were in. We're at a place right now that we don't necessarily want to be. There's a lot of pressure, and there's even enemies and adversaries that are making our life very difficult right now. Now, there's a place just across this flooded river that if we can get to that side, it's going to be the land that God has promised to us. It's going to be better than our current situation. Yet, there's this river that is preventing us from getting there. Now, most of us have found ourselves in that spot at one time or another. Some of us are going to find ourselves in that spot now, and we're all going to be there eventually. So what Joshua says is, I want to put these stones down to remember the day that God stopped this river and allowed us to cross here. So you can go to the Jordan River and you see those stones, and the people of Israel will always remember what God did on that day. Now here's the deal. In our life, we have stones, memorials, that each of us is creating on a daily basis. It's called life. Now, just like Joshua had the priests lay these stones across the river so that people could remember in the future, our life is basically an activity that happens that allows us to put down stones so that people can remember what we are and who we're about and what we've done. Now, what we call this in our life is leaving a legacy. Leaving a legacy. And here's another deal. If I would talk to each of you individually in this room, all of us want to leave a positive legacy in the world that we live in. I don't think there's a single one of us that's wired that says, I'm just going to come and extract all this stuff out of the world and not give anything back. I think we're wired that we want to make the world a little bit better place. We want to leave a legacy that is going to be meaningful. Now, all of us are leaving a legacy right now. For some of us, the legacy may not be very much. For some of us, it may not even be a good legacy. Some are striving forward and doing the absolute best that you can to leave a legacy that matters to the people that matter the most. But whether we know it or not, we're all leaving a legacy, aren't we? Now, on Wednesday early afternoon, I got a phone call, and I hadn't heard from this friend in a while. It's probably been like 6 or 9 months or so, and I could tell that there was a serious tone to his voice. Usually when he calls me, it's jovial and we're messing around. But he just said the words, Craig, have you heard about Jeff? And I'm like, no, I assume this is something serious. What are you talking about? He says, well, Jeff was riding his motorcycle, and there was a car that pulled out in front of him, and he died. And my heart just stopped. This is a man I've known for years. A man who's 2 years older than me. A man whose youngest child is just a year older than my oldest child. So yesterday at the funeral, there was hundreds of people who were there. All the motorcyclists sat in the first 10 rows on the right-hand side. It was touching, it was cool, it was meaningful. By far the highlight of the service was when his son, who just graduated from college, gets up and shares about a legacy, about a life that was well lived. He goes and he sits down and he hugs the mom, and then the daughter, who's a high school student, comes up and she starts to share. The brother realizes this isn't going to happen on her own, so he goes up and he holds her hand while she talks. And she shares about a legacy, about a life that was well lived. After the funeral's over, the motorcyclists all escort the body back to the funeral home. And part of my heart just stopped again as you heard all these big motorcycles thundering, taking their friend one last time down a street that he's ridden down many times. None of us ever expect that we're going to get that phone call, do we? The flowers on the altar was a story of a woman that died at age 74. She gave much of her life to investing in children. She had an in-home daycare for decades. When I spoke to the congregation on Thursday morning, I couldn't help but think that many of those were kids' diapers that she changed, and just how many meals and how many mouths she fed over the years. How many lives that she impacted by doing a simple thing like watching somebody else's kids every day. We're all leaving a legacy. One day, the pastor is going to stand in front of the church, and he or she is going to ask to be saying some words about you. One day, maybe your children or your grandchildren will be asked to share some thoughts about you. And the question I have for all of us is, what kind of legacy is it that we're leaving? What kind of stones are we laying down so that others can remember that we were here, and when we were here, we made a difference? I want you to think about 3 images. And these are images that all of us are very familiar with. Image number 1 is the image of a graduation. Now, yesterday there was 3 of these, weren't there? Millard West and Millard South and Millard North all had their graduations back to back to back, and the parents and the grandparents and maybe some of the aunts and uncles are crowded into the civic center, and the kid gets their name read and they walk across the stage and they get the diploma and they get their 3 seconds of fame for 13 years of service. And the parents, they're probably remembering the first day that kid went to kindergarten, and the PTA had a little booth where they gave Kleenexes away because we see these little kids walk into these big doors for the first time. It was an emotional moment for us. And then there's the graduation parties. I love graduation parties. I get to go to 6 of them today, and there was 2 weekends ago they had some, and last weekend they have some, and next weekend there's a few. And this is how I feed my family for an entire month. The poor kids, they didn't get breakfast this morning because they're going to graduation parties this afternoon, and there's even one tonight. And what we do is we strategically go to the party at the end of the time when there's leftover food, and they say, well, we don't have plates for you to take them home. That's all right. We bring our own doggy bags. And we've been eating ham sandwiches and cake and those little sweet mints for the last 3 weeks, and the next 2 weeks are looking pretty good as well. The uncles and the aunts show up, and then all of a sudden, the Monday after it's all done and the cake is all gone, the student wakes up, and the same identity that they've had for the last 13 years is an identity that they no longer have. Now, this is where some of you are in life. Maybe not as the high school graduate, but you're young. And there's so much of life that is in front of you. There is so much time to leave a legacy that matters for those that you love the most and for those that God loves the most. But I would say don't wait. Because we're not guaranteed that tomorrow will come. The only thing that we can do is make the most of what we have today. Last night, Amber and I went to the symphony, and the last song that the orchestra played was by this guy named Schubert. I like when the conductor stops and says what's going on because I don't have a clue otherwise. And He was saying that this guy wrote this song when he was 19 years old. And he died when he was 31. Soren Kierkegaard, I was reading his book a couple weeks ago, and you probably noticed that in last week's sermon. And one of the great philosophers of all time, the father of existentialism, and he died at age 42. We're not guaranteed the number of years. All we can do is make the most of the years that we have. So for those of you who are at that stage of life, make the most. Start with the legacy yesterday. I want to give you another image, and that's the image of a wedding. Yesterday afternoon, Amber and I went to a wedding down at First United Methodist Church in Omaha. And a friend of mine who's the associate pastor there, she got married to her fiance, and it was a beautiful ceremony. Very long ceremony. It lasted like an hour and 15 minutes. I leaned over about the halfway mark and told Amber, I said, my service is never more than 25 minutes. We'd be eating the cake by now, and but it was a beautiful, and I know these two, they're dear friends of mine, and where they're at right now is a new place in life. And some of us are going to find ourselves at that new place in life. Maybe we've been recently married. Maybe there's been a job change. Maybe there's a new opportunity. Maybe something is different today than it was last year. And we find ourselves at this new place in life. And as we think about building a legacy, what we do is we start from where we are. Transitions are going to happen in life. And, last week I talked about transitions. And if you missed that, you can get the CD out in the foyer today. But, with the transitions, we have to start exactly where we are. We can start nowhere else. And then we can create those stones and build that legacy from this point forward. Now, the last image that I want to give you is the image of a house. Now, I saw this house back in November. This friend of mine bought a house, and he was going to rehab this house and fix this house up. And I'm like, dude, it's not as easy as you see it on TV. I mean, this is a lot of work. And he bought this old house, and it's in a really nice neighborhood. And I walked into this house last November, and he had it totally gutted out. All the trash was out. The yard was a mess. There was those big containers in the driveway, and he's going to do this all by himself, he said. And I said, all right, I'll see you in a few years, And he called me up last week, and I saw the house earlier this week, and the house is beautiful. I mean, it is amazing. It's like one of those houses that you see on TV. It's got all these cool colors, and it's got this new floor. The outside is all landscaped. I mean, it is actually a stunning house. Now, some of us may find ourselves like the graduate, with so much of life in front of us. Some of us may find ourselves like the bride and the groom at a new spot and a new transition in life. But I think most of us, the image that we're going to look at here is the house. And I believe that in our messiness, I believe that in our brokenness, I believe that there is a master carpenter who can do a work in each of us that is going to be so profound and so powerful that we are going to be somebody that we've never been able to be before because of the work of the master carpenter. So what we do is we start where we are, and we allow him to work in us and through us so that the stones that we lay down in the future are stones that provide a rich legacy for those people that we love the most and for complete strangers who God loves. Now, as we look at starting where we are, I think the best way to look at the type of legacy that we can live is by looking at the life of Jesus himself. I think the first type of legacy that Jesus left was a legacy of generosity. There's at the funeral, we don't want people describing us as a miser or a stingy, never sharing anything. We want to be described as someone who was generous. And as we look at Jesus, he was as generous as you're going to find. He gave the thing that is most important to him and most important to us, and that is his very life. To the one who betrayed him, to the one that doubted him, to the one that hung him up on the cross, to those who laughed at him. Jesus gave his life for each of those people. Jesus gave his life for each of us. It's not because we have earned this or because we deserve it. It's because of who he is and what he wants to do in us and through us. Jesus modeled for us what it meant to be generous. And now we have the chance to share this generosity with each other and with the world that we live in. Now the next legacy, the next stone that we're going to put across this bridge is the legacy of servanthood. Now I really believe if someone pigeonholed me and said that I had to describe Jesus in one word, I think the word that I might use would be servant. As you read through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, I think that Jesus served more than he did anything else. He served the disciples. He served the people that he hung out with the most. He served complete strangers. There's a story in the Gospel of John where Jesus is getting ready to administer the Passover, the Lord's Supper. And before he did that, he does something that only John records, but it's an enchanting and incredible story. Jesus asked one of the disciples to take off his shoes. That was no, it's not for me. You're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to wash your feet. It's kind of like this. I want to put this into modern day context. It's kind of like, we had all these people that ran the half marathon and the marathon a few weeks ago. It's kind of like if one of you were at the finish line and like you were taking off the runner's shoes and taking off the runner's sweaty socks and washing their feet. Now, this is not the most pleasant place in a body to wash, but Jesus uses this as a metaphor. He says, I'm willing to do the thing that no one else is willing to do to provide this illustration of me serving you. Now, I want to challenge us, and I'm going to go back to generosity just for a second, then we're going to go to servanthood. I want to do these two together. This week, I want you to make this practical in your life. I don't want you to just leave here thinking, okay, that's a good idea. The preacher's probably right. I should be more generous. I should be more serving. I want you to think of a person in your life right now. I want you to think of an organization in your life right now, one of the two, that you can just absolutely be generous to this next week, these next 7 days. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's the person you're sitting right next to. But I want you to define for that person what generosity means. I want you to lay down this stone in this river so that when this person looks at this stone, they can see that generosity has been modeled through your life. And then on a related project, what I want you to do is think about who you can serve this week. It may be serving the spouse that we're married to. It may be serving the kids that we have, or kids. It may be serving your parents for a week. It may be serving a coworker, a stranger who lives down the street. But I want to challenge you to practice this in your life, to start living the legacy this week. I think what we're going to find is when we do these things, we're not only going to make somebody's day, we're going to make our own day. And God is going to do something in us as he works through us. Okay, so these are the first two of the stones as we're crossing this river to get to where God wants us to go. We have the stone of generosity and the stone of servanthood. Now, the next stone I want us to look at is a stone of gratitude. As we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was the most grateful person that I've ever read about. Jesus was the most grateful person that I've ever experienced. When in the New Testament can you ever find Jesus complaining? Jesus doesn't say, okay, well, this food isn't very good. I'm going to go somewhere else and see if I can find something better. Jesus doesn't say, well, if I only had a house to live in, I could really be effective in ministry. Or Jesus, he didn't even complain about the 12 that couldn't figure out anything. He's, if you guys could finally figure this out one day, you might be fairly effective. Jesus didn't complain. He loved and he mentored and he embraced and he thought about what was best for people. It was an attitude of gratitude that he had. Now, Contentment in life will only come when we spend more time. Listen to this. If you want contentment and joy in your life, here's how it happens. Contentment and joy in life only happen when we spend more time being grateful for what we have rather than complaining about what we don't have. A grateful heart is also a healthy heart. Now, we can make this very practical in our life today as well. What I would encourage us to do is, sit down and write down a list of things that we're grateful for, and these things are many. From the clothes that are on our back, to the roof that's over our head, to the food that we get to eat, to graduation parties that we get to go to extract as much food as we can for a 24-hour period. There's many things that each of us has to be grateful for. And the moment that we can start focusing on the things that we're grateful for is the moment that we can lay that stone down. We're going to say, I'm going to build a legacy of gratefulness and gratitude for those people who come behind me. The next one is the legacy of an investment in children. Jesus was very clear, at least 3 times, about the priority of children in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said one time, he says, the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And Jesus, there's another time when he went and he blessed the children because he said that theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, as we start leaving a legacy, wherever we are, we're starting where we're at, as we leave this legacy, one of the things that I want to encourage all of us to do is invest in children. You can invest in your children, you can invest in somebody else's children, you can invest in your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, the kid down the street. We got all these bags out there that need to be filled up for Bible school this summer. You can take one of those bags and bring it back and fill it up with the stuff that we need, and you're going to be investing in the life of a child in this local church. I think the highest place of servanthood that we have in this church is serving the little kids in the frog pond. I don't think that there's a higher priority that we can have rather than investing in one that God loves so much. Now, I want to make this practical for you this week as well. I want you to think about a kid in your life. Maybe it's your own child. Maybe it's a kid that nobody else seems to be terribly interested in investing in. Maybe it's an organization here in town or somewhere else that invests in the lives of marginalized kids. I want you to think about one of those organizations or one of those kids, and I want you to just dream about what it might look like for you to start leaving a legacy in this kid. This is what Jesus did, and I believe it's what we should do as well. All right, so we got 4 of the 5 done. We got the legacy of generosity. We got the legacy of servanthood. We've got the legacy of gratitude and the legacy of investment in children. The last legacy that Jesus left was a legacy of grace. Now, there's one thing that the church has that no other organization has, and that is the legacy of grace. Jesus, in his encounters with people, he always embodied grace. When the Pharisees challenged him, he didn't get defensive. He offered them grace. When he saw the prostitutes and the tax collectors, he didn't go and condemn them. He told them that they were loved, and he offered them grace. When his disciples messed up, he may have talked to them, he may have tried to correct them a little bit, but there was never a time when he did not offer them grace. Grace is, it's how the world began, and it's how the world will end. Grace, I think the best definition that I've ever come across is it's forgiveness from the past, power in the present, and hope for the future. Now, for those of us that have influence over younger ones, and I want to go back to the generation and the investment in kids, I believe that the most powerful and the most profound legacy that we can leave our kids is a spiritual legacy. I believe that if we can teach our kids to understand and experience grace in their life, that pretty much everything else will fall into place. It doesn't mean that things are going to be perfect. It doesn't even mean that things are going to be easy. What it means is that God is interested in us, that God is so interested in us that he is never going to give up on us. Not because of our worth, but because of his worth, and our worth then through him. Here's, I think, what the graceful life looks like. I think when stress enters into the graceful life, that the person doesn't become angry. But I believe the words of Paul when he describes love, and he says that it's patient and it's kind. I believe that grace is forgiving. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, that it keeps no record of wrongs. I believe that grace is an attitude on how we relate to other people. I believe that grace is an attitude on how we relate to ourselves. I was talking to a person earlier this week in my office, and the difficulty that this person was having was the forgiveness of self. And I believe that the same grace that God gives us, the same grace that we can receive from others, is the same grace that we can give to ourselves, so that the past no longer has us captive, so that the present does not scare us and the future gives us hope. So as we look at those stones in the river, I want you to remember those 5 stones. I want you to remember that stone of generosity, that stone of servanthood, the stone of generational investment, the stone of grace, and the stone of gratitude. And really what I want to do is challenge you right now to think about which one or two of those areas you're going to leave a legacy in this week. Maybe it's someone that we serve. Maybe it's someone that we give grace to. Maybe it's a kid that we invest in. Let's go to God and let's pray.
Come to the water's edge, are you who know and fear the Lord? Come and listen. Come to the water's edge, are you who are thirsty?